again, let me set the tone. You're going to hear a conversation. You're going to see some videos. You're going to get some dialogue, and I'm going to go with you. And of course, if you've seen the title, should we be a little leery of UFOs? So, and again, I investigate UFOs. I've done several TV shows about how UFO encounters turned out, but now we got a little more evidence from a doctor who was cited with the CIA and all these other organizations to investigate some of the activities that these UFOs was causing human beings. In some cases, ultimately death and brain damage. So we want to get into this, and this is something that a debate that I've had a lot of times, and it's like, you know what, Roderick, what do you think about UFOs? And you have these two factions. They come in peace, and then you got this faction says, it's a threat narrative, and then we got the people in the middle who's like, all right, whatever. So by time of this show, you can make a determination if you want to be seen with a UFO, or if they show up tomorrow and park in front of your yard. Do you go out there and say greetings from Earth, right? But I'll tell you, you might want to wait a minute to after you watch this show before you go out there and start shaking hands with some of these UFOs. And so, all right, so let's get down to get right into how I'm going to start this topic off. And it's basically simply, as I said in the beginning, do these UFOs, do we need a warning label for these UFOs? And I didn't come up with that phrase. I watched Dr. Nolan talk to Tucker Carlson, and if you know who Tucker Carlson is, he does his own, Nation, Fox Nation TV, and Tucker Carlson TV, and all that. And he's a guy that has some radical views when it comes down here. Okay, and some of those things I think a lot of people will say, okay, this is about him. But here's what I want to put down the layers for you. Here's a guy got his own show. He makes millions or gazillion dollars, if I can make that up as a term, per year. And you would think, would he want to put his reputation on the line to even talk to people about this UFO thing? Then you're going to have Dr. Nolan on the other side. Do he want to put his reputation on the line to talk about this UFO thing? And then you ask yourself, especially in some communities, do you talk about this UFO thing? And now I think a lot has changed. A lot of people see it's in the mainstream. We're going to get to some religious things about these UFOs today. So you definitely want to stick around for that and know that it is a big deal when it comes down to religion and these UFOs. So as you see down here, we're talking about, do UFOs need a warning label? I'm going to start out with the first exchange that I put together for you between Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan, and Tucker Carlson, and then we would get into this. I took some notes for you, and again, it's all about informing you of what's going on, and we're going to do that. And one of the things we're going to talk about in this particular thing I'm going to show you is other injuries and things that are coming out, and is the government really being honest? So let me play the first clip for you, and then you guys decide for yourself, and then we're going to hit this thing right about now. So let me do this. Here we go. Check it out.
Were you surprised that a U.S. government agency was doing this kind of work? I mean, presumably the question was settled for them. They didn't wonder if UFOs were real. They knew at that point, right?
Right. No, of course. I mean, like I said, at first I thought it was a joke. I really thought that somebody was about to put me on candid camera and make a joke of it. But as they started showing me the data, and they were deadly serious. I tried to lure them into making a joke about it. They were deadly serious about it, because they had basically said at that point, people have died. And then they showed me some brain images of individuals who had been damaged, and internal scarring you can see through MRI.
Yeah, and so I think what we need to look at with that is to really try to see exactly what was going on in that particular conversation and exchange, okay? And hopefully things are good on your end, and so I'll check that out here and adjust some volume and see if I can really on this side of the fence, if we can do that. But the whole point is that you saw it. And he said that people are dying that are having UFO encounters. And one of the things, when I got into this particular research and ufology, it was a joke. People wouldn't want to talk about it. People thought, okay, you got to be cuckoo if you're going to get into these conversations when it comes down to these UFOs. So what you see here is that our government said, wait a minute, we have a lot of things that is happening with these UFOs encounters. Let's reach out and talk with someone, a doctor, this guy who is real well known, and let's get his opinion. And like you heard him say, he thought it was a joke. He thought he was going to be pranked just by them coming to him, and then he saw that they were serious. And this is one thing that I want you to gather from tonight. It is a serious thing when it comes down to some of these encounters. And now I'm not trying to pass the word, oh, be afraid. Okay, we just can't talk to these UFOs. But at the end of the day, there has been stories. Now, the problem is when you think about it in the past, we haven't heard about these things. It's been a big secret. And now it's causing some of these people that's former military, all these people are having these health issues. Some are dying. And there is a classification slapped up on their medical records where they cannot get the help that they need. And so all of a sudden, here we go. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions for you. You saw the clip. And one of the viewpoints is, you know, we do know that the CIA, the DOD, Department of Defense, for some of you, is now concerned about the health and well-being of some of these people when it's coming across this phenomenon. And the question is why? And then the question is, why has it been a big secret anyway? Why now do they want to look into this? And if you got some answers toward all that, I'm going to look into the chat here, a few of you, if you want to chime in on it. Why do you think now that the government, the DOD, is now taking this seriously and openly, that they're going to look into what is really happening with people? All right, so King Charles' radiation and frequencies. Okay, I'm down with that. You know, being a UFO investigator is one of the things that they have to check for, is to make sure that there is no radiation, especially if there were some type of landings and everything else. But what I'm hoping, though, at the end of this, though, and thank you, King, for your answer, is to get into the point of saying, guys, this stuff is real. It's getting ready to get bigger. It is something that we should pay a close attention to. And at the end of the day, you want to do it. So when you just saw that clip, you saw the engagement and conversation, and now the question begins. And so I flip side of that, though. When I look at some of the things that I look at is, now, is the government trying to cover their, you know, their behind, so to speak, right? Because if you think about it, is they're probably done got in a lot of trouble, or legal trouble now, because remember, Congress is now set in motion that, hey, we got whistleblower now. You can be protected. You can come out and begin to tell your sugar honey iced tea out here. And this is something that they're beginning to do. So are they trying to protect themselves? Are they trying to cover their own behinds when it comes down to this? And I think that's one of the things that we need to look into. So on one hand, no, are they trying to be friendly? Or are they trying to help these guys out? Or are we trying to now take it seriously? Or we better cover ourselves for these massive lawsuits and things that could possibly happen when this get out. So let's get further on into it. And we're going to speed this conversation up for you. And so that's the start. Do we need to have a warning label on these UFOs? And by the time we get through with this show, I think we're going to have an answer for you for that. So you make sure you hang around to see the warning label when it comes down to these UFOs. And so another part of this, though, is to, again, why is it the big secret? And then we know that when you heard this guy talks about a few things, and we're going to get into it next. And this is where it's going to get deep. So I'm going to play the second clip for you. And then from there, this whole conversation is getting ready to take a ride. So I hope you're ready. And if you are ready, slam ready in the chat there. And I'll just know that you guys are with me. And then at the same time, smash that like button if you're getting value from the conversation, because we're just getting started. And I think, again, this is going to be a great evening for you to be really getting down with the conversation. So let's get on down with the next part of this. So as we move down to where we are, and thank you guys for participating with the readies. Where we're going to get down to this is, it's all about what Congress is doing. And I get this question all the time. People like Roderick, well, what's the difference between Congress now and Congress 60, 70 years ago? Well, we have a whole different young people that are new people that are now in Congress, and they're curious. They want to know the answers, and basically they want to follow the money. When you think about it, back in the 50s and 60s, Congress was not going to pursue the answer, because this whole why the big secret of UFOs was this thing that nobody wanted to touch, nobody wanted to talk about. Now you got these new Congress people, and now it is a different ball game. But taking count of this, taking count of you as an individual, understanding that it is your tax money. Okay, we now have an official congressional office for UFOs. We now have UFO provisions that is coming out of everybody's check, and so the joke is no longer a joke, it is a real money deal. So let's play the next clip and let's get down into this conversation, and hopefully everything is there for you to listen to it.
Were you surprised that
All right, so let's go with it right now. And you know what? Another part of this, and before I move forward, we need to talk about that warning label. So let me bag it up just for a minute for this guy to kind of explain to you about putting a warning label on these UFOs. And I think I would have skipped over it, but this is too important for each and every one of you to kind of see this particular part. So let's kind of go into
the injuries you saw are not inconsistent with like exposure to nuclear material.
Correct. Yeah. And so what that tells us is, I mean, at the very least, what I would say is that, you know, let's say in the next round of UAP directives from Congress or from the Army or the Air Force is stay away.
Stay away.
You know,
you see a glowing craft on the ground.
Right. I mean, it seems obvious, but, you know, I mean, some of the people who I know were so intrigued by what they were seeing, they felt that they had to walk up and touch it because this couldn't possibly be real. I mean, I would probably be in that category.
Oh, me too. Oh, totally.
You know, and so you can kind of understand, but I mean, I think one of the directives is until we know what is going on, stay away. I mean, you know, for all
so
we know,
put a warning label on UFOs.
Yeah, I will.
So that is kind of interesting there. Again, put a warning label on UFOs. Now, we may be seeing this for the first time, and you may be seeing it for the second or third or fourth time or first time, and you're thinking, is they being funny? Is they're just doing it? No, I don't think they're being funny, because I've been around this a long time, and I've seen plenty of reports that people have been getting a lot of injuries from these encounters, and everything hadn't been so hunky-dory, you know, where people are just really enjoying, oh, I got visited or I got abducted. People are truly being injured. In some cases, people are dying. So that asks the question now that UFOs are now becoming mainstream. People are talking about it more. So the question for you is, and for audience participation at this moment, do you want to have a UFO encounter? Would you want to literally see, touch, feel, meet some extraterrestrials or UFOs? And basically, someone talking about nope. But you know, the whole point is it? Do you? Because it's changing now. I think we're getting conditioned for the fact that we're not alone in the universe. But at the end of the day, it is now going to really change. So again, I'm gonna ask some people, put it in. Someone else said yes. Sonia said yes, she wants to meet some people. Somebody else said no, I'm not touching anything. And so the question again, do you want to meet a UFO? So when you think about the seriousness of it, it just got real, y'all. It just got real when it comes down to the government's taking it serious, doctors are taking it serious. People are now getting hurt from these things, and it's no longer this majestic side. Now, don't get me wrong. Not all the extraterrestrial species out there are mean, and not all of them are seriously out to stop mankind. But we're going to cover some of that in a little bit here in the show. But the whole point is the beginning of this narrative of what they're saying now is people are dying, and this phenomenon has something else. So let's get into the second part of this topic, and we will get down to where we at with this right now. So let's go into it.
This is way outside your lane, but since you've had so much experience dealing with all the people involved, maybe you have a theory. Why do you think DOD or the U.S. government more broadly has lied about this for so long?
So I think that they were just afraid of admitting that they don't have control over the airspace.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But also, it's really back to what it is that I was saying before. We have the data, but we have, or to the extent that there is proof that there's something else here, they didn't want anybody to know about it because they're scared of what the reaction might be.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, that's a human reaction.
It's a human reaction.
Yes.
But the other point is, I think that's important to realize, is that when a lot of, let's say, these events were occurring and there's claimed crash materials that might have been collected, this went off to places like Lockheed and all of the big aerospace companies. They wanted to profit off of it. And many of them basically took a lot of the information, set it aside, and they decided, okay, well, we're going to profit off it. We're not going to tell Congress what this is all about, because if we do, then maybe we have to share this with McDonnell Douglas.
So now, when you just heard that exchange, and when it gets down to our military and what they want to admit, and see, I've said this before, if a lot of you have seen the Infinite's Tic Tac videos or some of the Navy footage that came out, and of course you've seen some of the, I think it was Commander Fraser and Ray Dietrich, or Dietrich, and they were talking about how they literally was not comfortable with that encounter, because again, these guys were top Navy SEAL, not Navy SEALs, but what was that, Top Gun commanders and everything else. And so that's one thing for sure. The military is not going to want the word to get out to the public, to anyone, that not only that we're defenseless when it comes down to some of these anomalies or UFOs or UAPs, but at the end of the day, even some of our prized people have some second thoughts when it coming into contact with some of these things. And just like you said, they don't want to admit that. So another point is the fact that the data, okay, and we talk about disclosure, and that's one of the things in our particular industry, is that we beat it down. We want disclosure. We want to know. But actually, do we really truly want to know everything? And I pointed this out, I think last week or on one of the shows, and when we talk about the FAA, we talk about all these things that is happening. Do you really want to know that there is not some good things that's going on with this phenomenon, but yet it's becoming mainstream? They're talking about it more. And once again, how do you feel about that? Okay, we got one of the fierce armed forces on the planet, but on the end of the day, we got some things flying around in our airspace that even our military can't handle. And so that's one of the things. Now, we know, okay, it's the money. We're going to talk about the money here in just a minute. We want to talk about all these defense contractors and people that are getting crash retrievals. What are they really doing with it? And in that interview, if you saw it within its entirety, he was talking about, you know what, man, hey, listen, they may not even know what to do with some of this stuff. And so we'll get into that in just a minute. But when it comes down to the profit and the money, let them tell you what's really going on. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about the money. Check it out.
How could so if an aerospace, and I've heard this theory from very informed people, I don't think it's a theory, it sounds true, that if there are crash materials, and apparently there are, those reside in the custody of not the U.S. government, but of contractors that work for the U.S. government, aerospace, defense contractors.
Right.
McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed, etc. How could they profit off those materials?
Well, one, they can continue to ask for black budget money.
Oh.
For it.
Right. I should know this. I lived in Washington, right?
Right. I mean, that's
the funding continues.
The funding can continue. You might hope eventually that you can understand it, right? But and thereby profit off of it. But my point has been that whatever this stuff is hundreds of technology revolutions ahead of us, and understanding of physics that we don't appreciate.
Right.
So it's kind of like, the old saw is send a cell phone back to a Neanderthal and see what he does with it. Pound rocks.
He eats it, yeah.
All right, so there you go. We're talking about following the money, right? And I think people don't really truly understand how much money is involved when it comes down to this UFO extraterrestrial phenomenon, right? On one hand, we want disclosure, but do you know how much money they would lose, anybody out there, if disclosures was truly wide open to the public? Billions. And you know what? Another number. Let's go to another new word, trillion. Let's make up another word higher than that, because that's how big it is when it comes down to a dollar. And make no mistake about it, People will be killed. People will be ridiculed. People will be disappearing, as well as people living a great life when it comes down to this phenomenon, when it comes down on this money. And when you hear that conversation and the laughter about it, this is where you want to sit back and laugh about it. You want to sit back and like, wait a minute, because think about it. And the question you may be wanting to know, okay, what does that have to do with these private contractors? Well, for starters, there is a thing called the Freedom of Information Act. And this is stuff that's geared for me and you, anyone who want to require or request information on any of these government projects that we taxpayers have from these big secret keepers. But when they move this thing over to the private sector, it's none of our business. And it's no different than you telling somebody else, it ain't none of your business. And that's how they feel about it. And so at this point, they protect the secret. They protect these big secrets and they protect their pocketbooks. But here's the other kicker. They take this item and like you said, they try to figure out how it works. Okay. And then at this point, they ended up saying what? Well, we need another $30 billion to see how this thing works. And they just cashing in on the money and the money and the money, and you and I are paying for it. And once again, that's the new movement, UFO taxes. Y'all get ready, hashtag, somebody make it up, put it out there so we can find out what's really happening with our money and everything else. And so let me just give you a quick overview, some notes that I made. So we know that Congress now is finally doing the will of the people. They demanding these answers from these past 75 years. Now, the key to that is, will we truly get the answers, or are they playing a game with us? Because I truly thought when I first heard about this disclosure, that 180 days, you all remember that it was the biggest thing ever when they came out and said, okay, in 180 days, they're going to disclose to the public, you know, and me being a UFO investigator, researcher, I thought the jig was up. I was like, the jig is up. We don't have nothing else to do. The jig is up. And now I'm telling you guys, they don't took this game to another level. And while we are sleeping, and why we've been sleeping, and why we think we made some leaps and bounds in the disclosure, they just rearranged this thing a little bit. They done changed the game, you know, or the rules, because the game hadn't changed. The game has always been hide, and get money. But they done changed the rules, okay? And we got to adapt to the rules and start looking outside of the government. Man, there's other players out there, y'all. There are some other players who are in on it. They're getting the money. And this is why, once again, we talk about it from that standpoint. But, you know, again, Congress is playing in the hands of the DOD and the Pentagon by making everyone believe that the UFOs in the past 75 years has been extraterrestrials, which is a great cover story for the military tech world. So we know it's all about the tech. I was talking to Nick Pope a couple of weeks ago, and we was talking about why the big secret. And Nick Pope, if you know, is the former minister in military. He was over there, UFOs over in the UK. But anyway, he was in RODERICK. It's about military tech. It's everything about tech. And of course, follow the money. So let's get into this next part of this. And one of the things on this part, which is, I think, it's got a little humor to it for me, but it also is a serious point, and it was echoed.
It sounds like in the world that you live in, it is taken for granted, which is assumed to be true, that this stuff is real.
Yes. Yeah, it's 100% real. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. I mean, the data is real. And this is what when I have these conversations with other scientists who have told me, Gary, you're going to ruin your reputation. I was like, well, my reputation has been always going against the grain, and look at where I am. I'm perfectly fine going against the grain. This is real, and we need to pay attention to it, and it's just unscientific to not study it.
Yes, amen.
Right? I mean, it's just wrong. And if you're going to be that way, you're a priest, you're not a scientist.
Amen. Thank you for saying that.
So think about what he just said. You're a priest and not a scientist if you're a scientist and you don't want to explore this. Now, I want y'all to resonate that with yourself for a minute, because I've said it before. This phenomena is deep, especially when it comes to a cultural lens. And that cultural lens doesn't have to mean black, white, but it means your experience and how you see the phenomena. But think back, and I want you to, for you fact checkers out there and truth seekers, I really want you to truly check into what is happening when it comes down to this particular phenomena. Okay, one of the things about it is the guy talked about, as you heard, how the scientists may sharing this data. Okay, and some people don't want to share with other companies. Once again, the money comes from it because these companies have their financial stake, and they don't want to share the data. They don't want to share anything about any of this, to be honest with you, because they want the competitive edge when it comes down to this. But again, like he said, we should have people exploring the options. So if you or somebody you know are afraid to talk about these UFOs because of religion, then that's something that we could get into from there. So let me kind of get with some comments and notes that I wrote here. We're talking about one way to kind of see this thing would be the mainstream science and scientists sincerely are coming around to the idea that this phenomena can be and should be invested in. And I think that's a true note. And it's a good place for us to be, because now that we get more people that are interested in seeing this and understanding, or want a better understanding, this is what is going to move things forward. But on the flip side of that, when it comes down to the military side, I want my military to know everything, y'all. I do not want to wake up one morning and we seen the movie Independence Day, and all of a sudden they hear, and we got to sit here and try to figure out, what's happening. And like the guy said in the scene in the movie, they've been here forever. What do you mean y'all don't know what's going on? So we want to make sure that that's something that we're prepared for. Another point is that the science only cares about getting the funding dollars. Okay, that's the mainstream science. Okay, and getting that appropriated funds and the new military budgets and Congress. And you know what? Let me skip that little part and say this. This is why you saw NASA's shift, and this is just my opinion only. NASA was always one of the people saying, no, we don't want to get it. And they the first people to see these UFOs more than anybody. But they would not come out and say that they want to take or participate in seeking or getting more information. Now what you see is this. All right, JJ, I see you. So now what you see is that because there's money being thrown around everywhere, everybody's trying to get into it. So let's think about it. It's all about the money. So next part we're going to get into, I think, concerns each and every one of us, is abductions part of this conversation. They had a conversation in exchange about abductions, and I think when it comes down to this, it's a conversation that we should have. And the question I have for you on the screen is, does the government now acknowledge millions of abductions? Because you got to remember, abductions were stories we didn't hear. Now I have books over here on my shelf full of abduction stories, but none of it has been not just confirmed, but saying what the government said, okay, they just might be telling the truth. And so therefore these people have been ridiculed, their life and family life has just been thrown out to the wolves, only because nobody wants to believe it. Quite some time ago, I interviewed Captain Robert Salas, who's the former U.S. Air Force Command captain that was at the one of the bases when they was turning off the nuclear weapons. And one of the things he told me, he says, Roderick, now we're in a time that we have to trust the witnesses. Forget all the big secret keepers, forget all of the other stuff, but it's now to trust the witnesses. And I thought about that over and over and over. And I was like, okay, why? Because they're the one having the experience. They're the one who's having it. But now you're seeing that the government is moving over a little bit, trying to explore those things. But let's get into a conversation of what he said when it gets down to the government and what's going on with abductions account. Watch this video right now.
There are innumerable first-person accounts of people who claim they have been taken into some craft and experimented upon.
Right.
Have you come across those, and how do you assess them?
I come across those, but I, have a hard time. It's like what I was saying before. It's an encounter, it's an experience, but whether those experiences are real or whether or not they're imposed on these individuals as sort of an altered reality memory, I don't know.
So what do you think about that? What do you think about now that we are talking more about abductions in an open manner? Now, of course, does that raise a flag though? Does that get to a point for people in the public and saying, hey, do I want to walk around at night? Do I want to walk around at day? You know, I used to always tell people, you know, I'm not the brother that want to be walking down an alleyway, and then all of a sudden you see or hear this cat, you know, the cans, you know, the whole scene in all the movies the same, and then some extraterrestrials poking his head out around the trash can, and I'm supposed to say, hey, you know what, you know, come here, who are you, you know, creeping over there, what are you doing here? And no, I'm going the other way. And I'm saying this out of experience in some of the reports that I've read, but basically this is not something I want to be dealing with, because I can't tell you, when I read all the books that I have, all of them was abducted, and most of these people had experiences, some things that we don't even want to talk about live on a live stream. You can read it in their books, and this is one of the things I think that is really, really to really think about those things. Now, when we go into it though, the question to be asked is, you know, especially the medical science that Nolan is directly involved in, is doing abductees disservice by not including them in this effort, or is the science on the right track focusing on these cases? So what do you guys think? Do you think that we are now entering a time to where it is important for them to not only explore all these things from a scientific approach, but disclose it to the public? Do you want, on one hand, that they're now getting it out, we want the secret that some of these people are being abducted and they're dying or having these encounters, but do you want the public to know about this?